For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Jackie Tolge. I am the coordinator of transition services, and I'm going to lose count soon, but I think this may be week 4 of our Transition Institute. We are really excited to have Evan and Nicole back with us today to for a second out of 3 weeks that we're going to have them with us. And I'm going to hand it over to Ann Nygren, who's going to tell you a little bit more about today's institute and a little bit more about the logistics for today.
Thank you, everyone. So welcome, everybody. Today is the 4th seminar within the Transition Institute, and time is flying by. So far, we have learned about A through G and graduation requirements, due process and legally defensible ITPs, job carving, and today, teaching work readiness skills. Basically, what can we as transition educators do to help prepare our students for the workplace? We are so fortunate to have Grit and Flow back again today to lead today's seminar. Nicole Seward and Evan Stanokovic enlightened us last week with job carving tips, so we look forward to another great learning experience today. Before I hand it over, this webinar will be recorded, as Jackie said, and if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature, and there will be time at the end to get those answered. Timing-wise, please plan to be here for at least an hour, and also in the last few minutes of the seminar, I will post a link in the chat for that quick 5-question survey asking for your feedback. Thank you all for being here, and with that, I will turn it over to Nicole and Evan.
Thank you for that awesome introduction. And the last name, you are killing it. So I really appreciate it, especially the itch at the very end. That's always the hard one. Like they mentioned, my name is Ivan Stanokovic. I'm in California, yet I'm wearing gloves because that's how cold I am in my own house. And we're also joined by Nicole, who experiences real weather. Nicole, where are you at?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, where it was what, -2 Fahrenheit earlier this week?
Yeah. Yep. And very windy and cold, but we're in the season where it goes like this. We have a saying over here where if you don't like the weather, wait a while. So it's been pretty exciting weather this month as spring rolls in.
So very cool. Thank you again for having us. We're really excited to be here and kind of get started. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, just something I want to double check. I know that cameras can be on, but maybe Anne and Jacqueline can share. Are the participants able to do like a thumbs up or a yes or a no? None of those?
No, we're on a webinar feature, so they're not able to do so. They can put information in, they can ask questions in the Q&A. And
okay.
We've also left, let's see, our chat open where they can chat the panelists.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. So, okay, this is us. These are the things we will be talking to you about throughout the weeks. We did job carving last week, and we're focusing on work readiness today. So just some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please type them out as they come up in the Q&A. Nicole's going to be eyeballing that the whole time. And I think the second point, they've taken care of that for all of us. So the first thing I want to make sure we do is just a quick check-in and just see how everyone is doing. This is something that we did last week, and it just really helps to see kind of how everybody is. So I'm going to launch that. It is so cool in this end to just watch the numbers roll in. You all do such a wonderful job. Thank you so much. So, okay, I'm going to close it out in about 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Again, the main reason we do this is, again, we don't get to see each other. We don't get to be necessarily near each other. And we all go through all kinds of different things throughout the day. So it's always nice to kind of remember that. Some people might be having the best day ever, and some might not as much. So just, again, practicing that kindness. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today are these 6 different areas. We're going to be focusing on work readiness and why it's important, how to assess for it, some important soft skills to focus in on, how to work with unrealistic expectations and developing a plan, as well as making occupational profiles and how to build skills. And last but not least, talking about the ONIT assessment tool. So again, because there isn't much availability for interaction and Go, we wanted to see which one of these topics are you the most interested in learning about. That way, Nicole and I can make sure we focus on it a little bit more as we go through the presentation. Okay, so I'm gonna give it 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, I lied. I let it go a little bit more. Okay, so unrealistic expectations and developing a plan seems to be the one that's of the most interest. I'll try my best as I go through this to share my own personal experiences with this. But again, I think with any of this, it's important to share with each other what we experience. The students we get to serve are so unique that any opportunity, any learning opportunity that we have should be shared, because we might not run into it again, or for at least a while. So thank you. Okay. Just very quickly, our disclaimer. Nicole?
So we use a little bit of 2 different kinds of language. We are very aware that the autistic community and disabled community in general prefers identity first language. That is, I am an autistic person versus I am a person with autism. Though it is important to remember that people do have different preferences when it comes to identity language, and it's always best to ask them first if they prefer identity first or person first language. It might seem like a little thing, but it actually is a really big deal to us. So it does help if you let us know how, or ask us if it's what we would like to identify as.
I see that. There we go. I talked to myself and made sure that I said that I was muted. Okay. So again, the focus of this is that we're building towards best practices. All of these things, it's a lot of information, which is cool to have a lot of information, but having an appropriate expectation of building up to these best practices is completely okay, because they could be overwhelming, especially if you're starting off in this field. The other thing to take into consideration is that our presentation doesn't include the red tape that you all have to deal with and work with. So each K-12 system is different in some ways. LAUSD is a big district. You might be different between different schools. We do not take that into account into here because frankly, we just don't know all those different differences. But we're happy to, if you bring up a different predicament or something like that, to help brainstorm through it. Okay, so what is work readiness and why is it important? So career development is all about knowing where you want to go and making a plan to gain the skills and knowledge needed to get there. That is where career readiness really comes in. When an individual is career ready, they possess the foundational skills that they need to be at least minimally qualified for a position. So some of the skills that are needed are both foundational and occupational specific. They can vary in both importance and level for different occupations, and depend on critical tasks identified through the process of a job analysis or an occupational profile. So we're going to be providing you with the process, the best practices, the tools to use, as well as some assessments that can help identify some of these different things. So when it comes to skills that successful job seekers have, it's typically these. These skills can include problem solving, goal setting, time management, prioritization, effective relationships with both their coworkers and supervisors, and an ability to adapt to new and changing work environment. This last one has been extremely difficult this last year, especially, obviously because of COVID, but not just because we had a pandemic come into place, but the rules are constantly changing. What tier we're in? Are we in the purple tier? Or are we in the red tier? What does that really entail? the different news that they get from their own company, and how they need to adapt almost right off the bat the very next day at work, or maybe even while they're on their shift. So in addition to those, the other ones that are extremely beneficial is if the individual is proactive, goals oriented, if they're aware of their own disability, coping and self-advocacy, and ability to persist in a difficult situation. And every single one of these can be extremely difficult for any individual. Sometimes a lot of these can be very difficult. The one that, just to kind of share, my job development history is more focused on the post-secondary area. And the amount of times I've had to meet with my students and talk to them about their disability and them not being aware that they have a diagnosed disability is huge. So anything that can be done in the earlier stages of advocating about the parents talking to their kid about the disability or finding appropriate ways for you all to bring it up is wonderful as well, because it's big news to share and a big thing to process.
It's also good to prep them, as much as you can with these skills before they enter the workforce, especially preparing them for things like, there are going to be tough days and you are going to have to speak for yourself and voice your needs in order to, make the job fit their personal needs. And that's why the understanding of their disability is really important, because if they know what they need to support themselves, then they're going to feel more confident asking for that when it comes time when they're talking with their employer about accommodations.
Absolutely. Even, it might seem silly, it might not. Even the first poll that we do of the day of just checking in, people don't frequently check in with themselves. They don't recognize, you know what, I woke up today in a bad mood. And recognizing that can change the outcome of the day versus not taking that moment to check in. So, and that's where really looking at all these different components and thinking them through is things that as working professionals, we know because, hey, we've been working. But the students that you serve most of the time have only been students. And it's a completely new thing. I know when Nicole and I talk about this, I reference often just remembering that first day at work, not knowing anything and how overwhelming it is. And when you start that new job, you come home exhausted, even though all you did was listen and learn. Now imagine that for your students, what it's like when they feel similar to that potentially when they just go to school. And now we tack this on as well. Okay, assessing work readiness. So this part is, very important, especially last week we focused on building out relationships with local businesses and what that looks like when it comes to job carving, all these other things. A lot of these relationships are being built on the back end without the student being included, and they're philosophical in nature. How do you know now which student to connect to what business? That's the next part. So work readiness skills include both foundational and cognitive skills. So being able to focus on reading for information, applied mathematics, location information, problem solving, critical thinking, soft skills, different things like that. And these areas that you really want to focus on when assessing is their academic skills, personal and social skills, vocational skills, their daily living skills, and then also looking at their physical and physiological functions. It's important to look at all these different areas because this goes back to that person-centered planning. You're really looking to understand the whole individual, and you're really hoping to be able to identify where they're going to be successful, where we'll see, and things to kind of stay away from and work towards. We've all challenged our students. We've all put our students in positions where we knew they maybe lacked the confidence, but we believed in them and we knew that they could do it. We've also put them in situations where we knew it was going to be a growing pain for them. But again, it's important to be as careful as possible when doing these different types of things, because for them, it's their very first experience. I mean, I think all of us here can remember our first day at most of the jobs that we've started, how many first impressions we get. You get to be there for theirs, which is really kind of cool, but also very powerful. Okay, so just a little bit more detail on these. some different things to kind of consider. So when it comes to the physical functioning, really looking to see, how's their vision? Do they need glasses, contacts, different things like that? Is their hearing good? Do they have a difficult time of differentiating where sound is coming from? So if they're working in a loud environment, it might be overstimulating to them. Physiological functioning, their needs, values, their temperament. What is their reaction when they get frustrated? Are there antecedents that you can identify? Are there antecedents that they themselves can identify? How are they in social environments? Are they very social? Are they people? Or do they kind of like to be more to themselves? And then educational. This is another one where, the one that really stands out to me is language skills and reading skills. So I know for me, I'm an English language learner. English is the fourth language that I've learned, and you'll notice me stammer a little bit as I'm reading my notes on the side, just because it's a different language for me. So it can be disability related, but a lot of times you all also serve a lot of students who are first generation immigrants. So there's a lot of different cultural components that can come into play too. So this comprehensive assessment isn't specifically just for disabled people, but it's also for anybody. So yeah, I want to make sure to bring that up. And then just their vocational functioning. What are their interests? How are their work habits? And you have them as students. You maybe can find out from the past or even from in your own classes, are there specific projects, specific assignments that they do really, really well on, and maybe other ones where they drag their feet, because all those different things are hints towards how they may or may not be successful in their first job.
Yeah, and when you assess someone so comprehensively, it's a really good way to make sure you're getting that job match fit. And it's a really good way to highlight areas that they might need to work on in order to be successful in the workplace. It's really important takeaway from this slide that one area of someone's life, such as the skills that they can do, or maybe something that they're interested in, is not quite enough to assess work readiness, because a lot of assessments that you take are really not going to take into consideration behavioral tendencies and temperaments and things like that. So this is really, all of these little minute areas are really areas that you can help build them up that will definitely impact their success in the workplace.
Thank you. Okay, some tips. So, these assessments can be kind of tricky. Again, I pull a lot of experience that I've had both as a student and as a job developer. And I remember first moving here, I was put through the ringer with a bunch of assessments and I was left alone with them. So there was nobody there to process them with me or anything like that. So the number one thing we want to make sure you keep in mind when doing assessments is that the focus is empowerment. You are going to find out some places where they maybe don't score as high, some areas that might be identified as weaknesses. But even knowing what those are, that there's a way to approach them in the way where the student feels empowered with that knowledge versus feeling like it's a weight holding them back. You also want to promote self-reflection, personal insight, and different types of creativity and how what different possibilities are available to them depending on what results they get back, what it means to them. Do they agree with it? Do they disagree with it? This is a part where I really wish people can raise their hands, but just to see, how many of you have taken an assessment and how many of you were like, oh my God, that's me 100%, versus saying, well, there's parts of me in that. It's the same for our students. And then again, person-centered approach, collaborative, working through it, explaining kind of what to look at when they receive that assessment, explaining it again, all those different types of things. So in the process of assessing work readiness and searching for employment, initial focus should always be on helping a person identify their needs, interests, choices, desires, and dreams, which are all really important to sustain job satisfaction. Furthermore, you want to identify employment options that fit well with the job seeker's personal vision. During the process, it is critical to remember that the professional's role is to guide and support the individual, not to be the expert who makes the decisions on the person's behalf. You all have such a wonderfully powerful position. You have this amazing ability to open doors, to be the support, but you also have the ability to close those doors. We all know the teachers that were there for us, that believed in us. For a lot of people, though, that could have been the only person that believed in them at that period in time. And we definitely remember the teachers that did not believe in us, or the counselors, or the parents, or the friends. So we'll get into this a little bit more with the expectations component of it. But when you have a student who comes up to you and says that they want to be a brain surgeon, and that's something that you personally don't think is plausible, how do you handle a situation like that without killing the individual's spirit? Because that's what they believe, no matter how disconnected it may be. That's real to them, and what you say really matters to them. So the other huge component to this is family, friends, and different community resources. Are they a part of regional center? What type of supports are they getting? Are they not getting those supports? So that you know how to leverage the students' needs. And then this is another one. This is from the One-Stop Resource Manual specifically. I personally don't love the fact that they identified this as multicultural issues, but we have students from all over the world. There's different cultural differences that exist. For me, where I'm from, super blunt, super forward. The sandwich method of saying something nice, what you really mean, and something nice again, does not exist. So can you imagine what it was like for me when I first started school, or when I first started my job? I had, even still, when I want to write an email, I will call over to my wife and ask her to take a look at it to see if the tone is okay. So there's a lot of different cultural components that might exist, and they might exist differently, even if the students are from the same cultural background.
You actually bring up a really good point there with your sandwich comment. So when you're, particularly when you're dealing with individuals who may have an intellectual disability or some cognitive challenges, sandwiching can sometimes backfire because they might not hear what's in the middle. And so when you are presenting feedback, specifically really important feedback, try not to confuse it with good and bad, because when they leave the conversation, they may only leave hearing the good and they may not have actually heard what they need to improve on. So it can be tough to give directed feedback that might only be slanted to one side. So I can understand the desire to want to use that sandwich technique, but it is really important to understand that it might not be the best form of communication for the individual that you're speaking with.
100%. And as you were saying that, I remember I was like, yep, I've been called into my manager's office. I thought it was a great conversation. It wasn't until years later on that they said like how uncomfortable they felt to tell me that I did something wrong or I said something wrong. And I was like, oh, I walked away thinking I'm doing great. So it can be uncomfortable for people to do it. But even if you, as long as you keep it objective and you can objectively identify, these are the things that are going really, really well. These are the things that can improve. And just keeping it systematic like that can go a really, really long way. Okay. So you want to look at all these different areas so that we can find out what this individual might be good at. There's a lot of different things that can get in the way when it comes, and the assessment doesn't account for. So of course, we all know you can't take it for face value 100%. You have to look through it a bit. And some of these may not be as successful for people depending on what their disability might be. The other thing too is, I know when I've done assessments in the past with students, you're kind of, you can be in a position where you can lead the witness towards specific answers. What I really like about doing assessments with students isn't the button that we end up pressing together on the assessment. It's the conversation that happens during the question itself, is really explaining what these different types of things mean. If it asks, are you more creative or are you more structured? I can answer that question now, but when I was in high school, no way. I don't even know what that means when it comes to work, let alone anything else. So for this next part, there needs to be this focus on actually matching the student to a job that they will enjoy. You want to make sure that it suits all these different categories because it impacts them in a few different ways. So, if it's not a good match, it can end with early turnover. You also might start losing the confidence of the business where you've developed this relationship with. But then, worst of all, at least to me, is the student's experience. There's going to be times where everyone wants to work. Well, I'm in Orange County. Everybody wants to work at Knott's and Disneyland. That's where they want to work. Maybe Angel Stadium. That's like a third safety. And those opportunities aren't always available. But it really opens up the importance of the conversation of, okay, are you looking for a job after this to make ends meet? Or are you looking for a career position? What are your specific needs? Because a certain level of compromise might need to happen. If you have a student who has a difficult time with crowds and going into very loud places and things like that, maybe having them placed at a position like that isn't safe for a lot of different reasons. They might walk away not ever wanting to go back to work. And the difference between work and school is, well, you kind of have to go back to school. With work, it's a little bit more of a tug of war. So, basically just trying to make sure that it's a good match overall and checking in. Something might look like a perfect match on paper, and then it happens, and then it's not at all. So that constant checking in, that feeling of this isn't, there needs to be an established feeling of this is a journey, not a destination thing. Their destination might be that they get a placement. Maybe that's your destination too, and that's okay. But the emphasis really needs to be on that collaborative, ongoing, person-centered effort of, is this working for you? And if so, what about it is working? Or if it isn't, what's the part that isn't working so we can try again and maybe be more successful at it? That way, it's not an all or nothing situation. And it allows for more flexibility in future placements for that student. So the other focus on it is that it's not just about the task skills, but like I was mentioning, the environment itself. You want to be focusing on just something that could also be enjoyable to them, because we all like going to work when we have fun. I'm sure some of us have had jobs because we needed the job, and we can all refer back to that and see what that time was for us. And that can be okay for students too. I've worked with students who they just need a job. They just need to make ends meet. They need to contribute to the family. Any type of job will do for right now. And then a few months down the line, or as soon as they get that job, they'll look for something else. It can take longer. It will take longer. But ultimately, it's what's best for the student. And it's what's best for maintaining that relationship with the business that you built. And for those of you who have been doing this for a while, building those relationships with businesses, it's not always the easiest part. So losing them can be very difficult. When you find out at a business that you've been working with for years, there's going to be a new manager taking over, it's scary, right? Because you don't know if they're going to have the same ideas, the same vision, the same goals as the person that you've just developed an awesome relationship with.
Also, with the elements of job matching, when he was talking about the effect on the student, if you don't match them properly to the job, then there is a potential that they will internalize if they fail, that it was them and not necessarily the environment they were put in or the tasks that they were doing. So the environment is important for their success in the workplace, but it's also important. The placements that you do now are really important for their future development, because if they're able to get employment that they can thrive in, then they're going to feel better about that next application process. If they fail, then they may be more apprehensive about re-entering the workforce, and they may be a little stunted in their career progress and as a result.
Exactly. I mean, just imagining, some of us have had that bad first day of school, right? And then we have to show up the next day, how much more anxiety we have over it. This is kind of similar, especially if there's a longer time gap in between. It's even more of like, oh, I can't mess up again, even though they might have not done anything wrong the last time. Okay. So when determining job matches, again, you want to look at what environments the individual enjoys, what environments they have previously been successful in. Again, in your class, are they good in group work? Are they good in solitary work? Do they enjoy working outside? Or they not like outside at all? Or do they get too hot or too cold when everyone else is kind of feeling normal with the temperature? All those different things matter. What social skills do they bring to the work environment? Are they going to be the one that chats with everyone and gets in trouble for it, or the one that has a really hard time engaging with customers? And then if you don't have the best place aligned for them, which that's normal and that happens, what would be a good place for them to work at? And then you can start looking at other local businesses where you can start developing a partnership. So, in the example over here, customer service director would value a friendly, outgoing applicant. A quiet person might be better off doing clerical work. So I know, and I think a lot of teachers might be like this too. I'm extremely introverted. Helps if I can say the word. So after this, I'm taking a nap, but I have fun doing this at the same time. Whereas other people, oh my God, this energizes them. So it's just finding what really fits. And then, yes, of course, seeing what places should absolutely be avoided. Okay, so you're talking to them about, wanting to do all these different assessments. You want to look at these different tools. How do you present this to the student? Well, you explain the importance of it. Give them the opportunity to, what's it called? Drive this process, as well as try to find ways that will meet their specific way of learning as well. And then allow for some self-reflection. So the other thing that I want to add too is use yourself as an example. Use yourself, keep it anonymous, obviously, of where you worked before, if it was an unpleasant situation or even a pleasant one, but relate to them, share with them. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was done with school. I wanted to be a chef, and now I'm an instructor. So, these are the things that happened to me. Oh man, I wish I had these tools when I was your age, all those different things. Because then the students don't always see us as people. It's weird, right? They see us as teachers. They see us as, these adults who know all the things, and they don't know how much self-doubt sometimes we have ourselves. And I think by sharing that, by being vulnerable in that way to an appropriate level, can really make them more confident in making all of these very, very scary steps. Yeah. Okay, soft skills. So soft skills are skills that enable you to really fit in the workplace. They're not technical skills, but they're all of these other skills. So communication, personality, work ethic, time management, positive attitude, flexibility. There's a ton of them, because all of these different things are helpful when it comes to being successful at work. You take out any one of these, you can think of yourselves as you look at this, you're like, okay, I'm good at this one, good at this one, have a hard time with this one. There's different levels that we need to be successful at these things, but we need to at least be aware of where our strengths are and what are areas of improvement. Again, for me, I'm by myself, my organization skills are like nothing. But I recognize that early on in life. So now I have a journal that I track everything in, keep really diligent notes on, because I know I will not remember what was said unless I write it down. I will think that I will, and I've not remembered enough times and not turned in my homework enough times to realize, no, I need to write it down. The most important part about soft skills is that there's many, many more. These are just kind of the key ones, and they change. Even looking beyond COVID, the last 10 years, when you look at where we've come to when it comes to utilization of the internet, technology, as well as social justice, it's a completely different world in the last 10 years. And then COVID has fast-tracked it even more in a lot of different ways. Okay, so this really helps determine who's going to keep the job. I'm sure there's people in here who have been managers before or have had coworkers before who are amazing in the field of knowledge that they've been hired for. But if they don't have the soft skills, they will not maintain that job for a long time. Or if they do, they're the person that people don't enjoy having to go to. So hard skills are different. Hard skills are things that you need, the technical skills you need in order to do the job. So here we have an example of, if I wanted to be a carpenter, well, I better be able to do carpentry things outside of the soft skills. But, maybe a big part of being a carpenter too is having good communication with the customer that I'm working with, my boss, with my colleagues, whoever else. So they work together. So these are some of the skills that are most desired by employers. And the one thing I want to note here is that these things change. A lot of things when it comes to soft skills, even hard skills, as well as what employers need, changes. So it's important to have your fingers on the pulse. So being a part of local business meetings or being in touch with different communities is going to be really, really important, because right now everyone's asking, well, they're seeing the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of it, of COVID with the vaccines and everything. So now the next question is, what's the world going to look like afterwards? And we don't know. The same way we didn't know what COVID was going to look like when it first started, how it was going to affect you as instructors and how it's going to affect your students. But these are the things that have kind of stayed true over time, is that, having a good work ethic, having good communication skills, teamwork, critical thinking, and being able to problem solve, and then just the social responsibility component. Okay, so this is the part that the majority of you really wanted to focus in on. So we're going to skip it. No. So it happens. Like I mentioned before, I had a student who wanted to be a brain surgeon, and I felt, sincerely speaking, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to tell him that, because he has a goal and he's excited and he wants to accomplish it. I will support him in that. And then we'll see where they end up. The same way I thought when COVID hit, my students that I teach, who all have disabilities, I didn't think any of them were going to show up on Zoom for my classes. And the feeling I had afterwards, after about 2 weeks, was, how dare I put limitations and expectations and say those words out loud to my fellow colleagues, like, oh, this isn't going to really work. We're going to have to think of a plan B, and put limits on the students that I serve. Attendance has never been better. The two schools that I teach at, they've had an increase in attendance, whereas other programs have suffered and lost students. And these are all voluntary classes that these students are taking. So that's something to always remember from your own experiences. When was the time that somebody either A, doubted you, or B, you doubted them, and then they've exceeded your expectations? Because it's better to operate in that mindset versus the other side of it, of like, oh no, they're not going to do that. So, these are the things that happen on the back end. The student themselves just might not be aware of their own strengths and their limitations. They have a much lower awareness of what work looks like. I used to think, again, I really did want to be a chef. Oh, I thought being a chef is awesome. Thankfully, now there's enough shows where I'm watching how many hours they work, what type of environments they work in. I would have hated it. So a lot of times, especially because they're young adults, they haven't had the exposure to these worlds. That's why it's important to try and establish internships when possible, or even shadowing when possible, so that they can have that exposure.
I had a pretty unrealistic expectation myself when I graduated high school. My yearbook picture said, career goals or whatever, and it was to move to Hollywood to become a famous actress. Now, clearly, I know as an adult that that's a really lofty goal, but I also could never have lived that life. Never. I'm autistic. That would have been very overstimulating and crazy, and I probably wouldn't have done well with the feedback. So I'm glad I didn't make that step. But typically, disabled individuals don't always have a lot of experience, even with their family, sometimes might not even think they can work. So they may not have even considered work for themselves. They might have not ever thought that about a position that they might want to do. And people may have been making decisions for them all along. So they may not feel really confident about making that choice or that decision. And that's where you can really come in and help guide them.
Yeah. To be 100% transparent, I remember when I was starting off as a job developer, there was a student who had cerebral palsy that I was working with, and they had to utilize a wheelchair, and they utilized the PEX board for communication. And my thought was, oh my God, how am I ever going to get this person a job? Why did we take this person into our program? All this deficit thinking, but it's natural, unfortunately. Like, that's just kind of where we start, right? This person has gone on to work at Regional Center as an advocate. They've also worked at a tech company to help teach others to use assistive technology. And the only limitation that student had at that point in time was me. It sucks saying it out loud, but it's true, at least for me. So, being able to compromise on these goals that don't match with the reality. So those are the different things that kind of happen. So this is what you can do. You can expose them to their preferred job, career, and environment and see what happens. Highlight the skills that are needed for the job and see if they themselves recognize that there might be a disconnect. Again, use yourself as an example. I studied to be a therapist. I went and I did my practicum. What was it? I had to study for 6-something years with college. Finally had an opportunity to work as a therapist. Day one, realized I hate this. I don't want to do this. 6 years, not down the drain by any means, but so being able to share even that type of example so that they recognize that you might build it out in your head to look a certain way, but you don't really know till you're exposed to it. One of the things that I ask people now, whether they be people straight out of college or straight out of high school, disability, no disability, is what is your dream job? Try to find 5 people on LinkedIn or 5 people that ask them that have that job, ask them, what is it something that you love about your job? What is something that you hate about your job? And what is something you wish you can tell yourself when you were about to enter this career? Because we don't know. We fantasize about all these different jobs, what that might look like, kind of like Nicole, you were sharing too about being an actor in Hollywood. Again, thanks to social media, we get an insight on what that looks like, and it's a crazy schedule. Whereas as a kid, at least I assume, oh my God, they just show up and do a movie and that's it. Sweet. So those are the different things to look at. Highlight the path towards achieving the career goal. So the student I was referencing earlier about wanting to be a brain surgeon, again, this is post-secondary. So I looked at our local career technical education programs, and they had, it wasn't a nursing program, but something akin to that, and a medical assisting program, I believe it was. So he went to that program and saw what he thought about that, because even after that program, he still wants to go and become a doctor. It's a great first step. So we might not end up at the career goal that we wanted to end up, but there's still several points between the end and the beginning where we can still find happiness. Goals can change, and recognizing that as well with the students so that they know it's okay if their goals change, that they don't have to be so hard fast towards achieving something. And then laying out the educational paths needed and the degrees needed to accomplish it. The one thing I would add in here too is the cost. Student loans have been in conversation for a really, really long time, but that's something that, most of the time, young adults or kids in general don't really consider, and they also don't have a point of reference. If you tell them that a program costs $20,000, $30,000, or whatever else, that they might not really know what exactly that means or what that feels like. And don't turn them away from it. There are different loans that exist. There are different scholarships that exist. There's a lot of different money that's out there, but it's still important to know, hey, it's this long of a commitment before you get to achieve being a doctor. It's this many years in college, medical school, residency, and then, so at least they know. And then the exposure to the career. If you can organize for them to shadow or organize for them to have an informational interview, that will go such a far way, because I think a lot of people don't know that's an option. And then when they start doing it, for one, it helps the student to kind of recognize what they want. Two, you're advocating for your student and your field by connecting them to these different working professionals, and you will never know how far that impact will go with the individual that you connected them with. Because if anything, this field can always do with more advocates. And then finding different activities that might help them out. So in my student's case, it really depended. I was trying to really find out what it was about being a doctor that they really liked. It turned out that they liked the prestige of it, which is a totally normal thing for most young adults and kids to do. But the other thing I would have suggested, well, what about working with animals? If it's more of the science health part of it, would that be something of interest to you? What about caretaking? Is it because you want to take care of people? So finding some different ways that they can accomplish that similar feeling.
And it can also tie back to the first point where if you give them an opportunity to do non-work activities in their field of interest, then they may realize that they are not suited for it. When I was in 9th grade, I decided to job shadow a radio DJ. I thought this would be great. And he said, this is a great job if you want to live off of powdered macaroni and cheese for the rest of your life. And I thought, I definitely want more than that from my life. So I didn't go for radio DJing, but today, currently, as I stand, I'm the music director and a trustee for our local radio station. So I found non-work activities. I found a way to incorporate that interest into my life. It's not my career, but that can also help stem or move away from an unrealistic expectation, because you also get exposure to the environment. Like, I wouldn't want to sit in a hole surrounded by carpet and soundproofing, talking through glass where no one else can necessarily interact with me. I mean, it sounds a little bit like a heaven because there's no social involvement, but I mean, it definitely would have been a tough job. So the exposure to that environment was really important, and it helped me change my mind and helped me realize that that wasn't a really good career expectation for myself.
Okay, so I see we're running close to our time, so I'm going to try to move through these next ones a little bit quicker. So here's just a quick roadmap of what this can look like, the whole process of it. So when you work with your student, you want to identify their interests, learn their strengths, develop their skills, help them create a resume, schedule informational interviews, cannot emphasize this enough, and then conduct job searches, and then hopefully get the job. So occupational profiles and how to build skills. You want to find out who is the student, what are their interests, preferences, what environments are good for them, different types of supports that they have, what skills and abilities do they possess, what job tasks can they currently perform. So again, this is where having something not static necessarily, but what is it, consistent throughout your program can be really, really helpful, so that all of you are tracking similar things. And then if you identify that adding something new works better or taking something out works better, you have that cohesion. And it also, in a way, forces collaboration, which is an awesome thing, because it's kind of difficult to accomplish it otherwise. So some ways to develop skills. So there's so many different ways, especially now with Zoom being able to ask if they can just set up quick meetings where travel isn't even included in it can be really, really helpful. Job shadowing can be done with a phone, or even a job tour can be done with a phone with the person there, so it can alleviate some of the anxieties. Okay, so for ONET, Nicole, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So ONET is, if you haven't heard of it, you may have, because it's developed by the government. They have they have three main assessments on their site. The first is an interest profiler, an ability profiler, and a work importance locator. All of the assessments that you take link you to potential careers in your that are based on your interests and your skills. And it also provides a lot of information that we'll show you on the next couple of slides when you take some of the assessments. So the interest profiler is an assessment that you can take to determine what you're passionate about and what you're interested in the workplace. This pops out a bunch of related careers, and it shows you a lot of different interesting aspects, which we'll go over in a second. The work importance locator, that helps determine what work values are really important for you. If culture is a make or break aspect of the job for an individual, you really want to focus on the work importance locator and try to match the values that they have with the values at the organization. And then the ability profiler is a multi-level assessment that assesses a lot of basic skills and ability levels, and then it compares you with a percentage of people your age in what their abilities are as a percentage wise. So if you take the interest profiler, it's based on John Holland's RIASEC codes. The RIASEC is realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. It's similar to a personality test in the sense that it tries to understand what elements based on the coded letters you are most passionate or interested in. So at the next slide, I think, if you click on any of these options on the left, it will bring up a summary of what that option means. So people with certain interests are going to like to do certain things. And if you have a student take this interest profiler, it can really help guide you on the environment that they might like, the type of work culture they might like, their interests, their passions, and really helps to seal in that job match aspect. It, like I said, connects you with different work opportunities. The little sunshines on the left-hand side mean that current job has a positive outlook. Maybe it might be a salary outlook, maybe it might be a job availability outlook, but if there is a sun there and there's a bunch of them and there's 5 suns, maybe check out the suns first, because those are going to be the more likely sustainable careers in the future. And then it also breaks down, I chose this as an editor's position. It gives you other names that they might go by that can help your job search and expand it with different search terms. It also talks about what they do. What would you do on the job? And what type of knowledge do you need? What type of skills do you need to do this job? And what abilities do you need to be really successful? And then it also, if you continue to scroll down to the page, it shows you this next slide, where it talks about the personality aspects that would be important to that job. Again, sealing in that job match aspect. What technology should they know how to use before entering the job force? What level of education is typically required? What is the salary outlook? You can see here, this job outlook is below average, maybe because computers are doing editing now. So that's something to consider if you have options. And then all the way to the right, it's links you with other types of jobs that are not necessarily related directly to your interests, but might be related to these other jobs. And it helps to further and further and further build out these potentials for work experience and careers. So this is our summary. We talked a little bit about work readiness and why it's important. We talked about the foundational skills that you need. We talked about the importance of understanding yourself and the potential barriers that an individual may have towards the workplace due to their disability. You want to discover their strengths and their preferences. Again, focus on job matching rather than skill matching. You want to assess work readiness. You want to develop a comprehensive assessment based on all those categories that we showed you earlier. Take care in using the assessments. Make sure that they are accommodated properly to the individual who's taking them. Again, person-centered all the way. Empowerment. You're taking these assessments so we can learn about you, so we can put you in the best job for you. This is all for you, because they might seem tedious. We talked about how job matching increases employment outcomes. We talked about soft skills and how important they are, and that people could lose their job if they're not focusing on their soft skills. We also talked about how to work with unrealistic expectations and what to do if an individual has those, and how to work with that individual to maybe get a more realistic job in the works. And then finally, we just went through some assessments and how to build some skills.
Thank you, Nicole. I got distracted by my little laser as if I'm my own cat and couldn't unmute myself in time. So thank you for covering that. And again, all this research comes from Nicole looking into all this different information and pulling from it. Everything we've shared is research-based minus our own personal experiences. So with that, we want to check in and see if you have any questions, or if you would like to share what you've learned. Please use the Q&A option.
I don't see any questions yet, but I'll let you know if they roll in.
Sounds good. And then I'll switch over to this other slide. It really helps us when you, if you're able to do surveys and just kind of let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what maybe would be helpful for the next one, because you do get to hang out with us for, or rather we get a chance to hang out with you all one more time next week.
No questions. We must have done that good. We just covered everything and no one feels like they have any questions. We do have a survey that we'd love for you to take. The QR code is there. I think he just mentioned that. I think he's posted it here. So we'd love if you could take that. Helps us improve the next time that we do training, which is what we try to do. We don't do this for us, we do this for you. So the more feedback that you can give us helps us do better the next time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, this was super helpful. Thank you both for being here. And all the links are over in the chat, and a lot of surveys it looks like you guys can do after this. And we look forward to seeing you next week for work-based learning best practices, back with Even and Nicole. So we will see you all next week, and the recording will be put on the Transition Institute flyer by tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, one last second to click on any links you need in the chat. And I am going to end the recording. Oh, and we do have somebody asking a question in the chat, Anne.
Yeah, it says, can you share the PowerPoint presentation to the presenters?
Oh, yeah, of course. So we can send that out to you. And yeah, we're working on making sure that it's as accessible as possible. So as soon as we accomplish that on our end, we'll send it over.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Of course.
Oh, I think we have another. Christina has a question.
Christina, you'll have to put your question in the chat or Q&A. And Anne, there's a question about being on the mailing list for next year in the chat as well. I wish we had a mailing list. We have an internal mailing list for our LA Unified staff. We've opened this up to non-LA Unified staff because, you know, with the innovation that we have with Zoom, which allows us for 500 webinar participants, we kind of felt like share the wealth. So we've invited independent charter schools and other SELPAs to participate. So we have kind of a sprinkling of people that have heard about this. I think Anne's email is on this year's flyer. So Anne will be the best person to keep in touch with if you want information about additional trainings that we're going to do next year.
Oh, I see a question. If a student does have very limited functional skills, it's definitely workable. Just find out that their actual abilities. Skills can be learned. So what skills can they learn? What do they have the capacity to learn? And then look back at those core functions that you really need to learn, like soft skills and whatnot, and focus on those as well, because some of the functional skills that you can teach now may not necessarily apply in the workplace, and they might need to learn those on the job. So if they don't have a lot of functional skills, you can work on those soft skills in the process, because those are really hard to grow and they are good things to focus on.
You have to be a detective, and it's hard work and it's long work too. But what I would suggest is when interacting with students that maybe are a little bit difficult to crack in the sense of, they don't know what they want to do, or their skills maybe aren't as obvious, look at the things that they do well or that they enjoy, and then dissect the skills that are necessary for them to be successful in those tasks that they might be doing for fun, and try to find transferable skills with the fun ones to the ones that can be applied to work. And it'll pop up. You'll randomly walk somewhere and see something and it will click for you as a good match. That's how a lot of times it can happen as well.
And to answer your question, ONET is 100% free. All of their assessments are totally, completely free. You can put the students right online to answer the interest profile. You can download all the tools to do the work importance locator and the ability profiler in your classrooms. Those are more hands-on. There is a paper version of the interest profiler if you would like, but it does all the scoring for you in the program online. There's also some free software that you can download for the other assessments that help code and churn out the results afterwards.
And as long as you have the results, you can always go back in and just repopulate the results that it spits out, and it'll populate the report for you again. So if you do it on your computers in person, or they do it at home and they close out that browser, as long as you have those numbers in place, you can repopulate and release
and that interest profiler does have an option to save as a PDF, I think, and you can share it through email, and they can also print it out at the end. So they could do it at home, they could do it in the classroom, and they can print out the results and bring them in. It takes about 20 minutes for the interest profiler.
ONET is such a blessing, especially as being government funded website. It's really, really good. And it does a beautiful job. I mean, I know I utilize it even for personal use, just to see the outlooks for different professions in different areas and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for explaining. So let's all go to ONET.
Yep, I'll go to ONET. Well, I'm about to hit end to the meeting, so off to ONET we go, or those of you that are interested in going. Thank you guys again. Nice to see you again this week, and we will see you next week. And thank you, Anne, as always, for your facilitation. And I'm going to go ahead and hit end so that I'll knock you all off. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.